So, hopefully you have an idea now about how we work on a specific topic with funders, but you also have an idea of how we involve children and young people in questionnaire design and question design and analysis. In fairness, we don't do that all the time. We don't always have the funding to do that. We'd love to do that all the time, but sometimes we lift indicators that government or other people have developed, Commissioner for Children's Rights, for example, and we ask those questions that were developed somewhere else, and that's fine as well. But sometimes it's really nice to work with children and young people throughout a project like that. So what remains to be done now until you have an opportunity to ask questions is to go quickly through some of the other questions that were asked and included in both of the surveys. Mike, I'll do that in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, so no worries about that. Okay, so on the right-hand side, you can see the topics that were covered, and I'm starting with the two topics that were covered in both the KLT and the Young Life and Times, Kids Life and Times and Young Life and Times, which is shared education and school bullying. Okay, so those questions were both contained in both of the sets of surveys. It's just a whistle-stop tour. That's all it can be for today. All the results tables broken down by gender in KLT and broken down by gender and religious background in YLT online from this morning. There are several hundred tables for each of the surveys. We understand I can't cover all of those. So, whistle-stop tour. Here we go. Shared education. Okay, so of course a big issue in terms of the reform of the education system in Northern Ireland. And what we've done is both of the surveys we asked the young people and the children for their experiences of shared education. As you can see, if you start here at the bottom of the table, actually, the 23 and 33%, they are the young people and children respectively who say they haven't had shared education. So if I convert that up, we have about 3/4 to 2/3 of children and young people who have some sort of shared education experiences now. Okay, so it could be classes, it could be particular projects, it could be sharing facilities that the schools have. So that proportion has increased over the years, and we had a meeting yesterday with the Department of Education. Of course, they have funding in place to increase that further. We capture that. The second word cloud, which we showed today, so that is to give you an idea of what the kind of things are. Of course, shared education in primary school and post-primary school is very different. Okay, so with primary school, you have an idea here of what sort of projects and contact children have, and you can see here that a lot of it is sports-based, play-based, football and swimming and sports come up, doing trips together with other schools, arts projects. These seem to be the things that they happen in primary school. In post-primary school, that's different. It's much more structured. Okay, and if you look at young people's and children's experiences and their attitudes towards shared education, you can see here that approximately half of both children and young people express favorable or very favorable experience and attitudes towards shared education. The figure that we heard yesterday was slightly higher, and that was in relation to T-Buck. I come to that in a minute. So that's approximately the experiences. Now, if you look at the other end here, so the number of, or the proportion of children and young people who feel unfavorable towards shared education is very small indeed. Okay, but in Kids Life and Times, you see about 1 in 5 who don't know, most likely because they haven't done it, or they aren't aware of that, or they haven't realized what they're doing. Is that okay? Now, the attitudes of Young Life and Times are very different as well. So some people are very much in favor of shared education. Okay, that's a quote there, and this young person says there's no need for all schools to be integrated. If you want your child to go to integrated school, send them to them, but if not, you should be able to go to the other types of schools, and then you have shared education projects. But we also hear things like that, and again, that very much reflects the discussion in the policy arena at the moment. Okay, shared education is, in my opinion, not integration. Okay, and I think integrated schools are much better at teaching inclusion. Okay, and then they go on to explain that integrated education is integration on an everyday level, and of course that reflects the discussion that we have at the moment. Okay, some people say that it doesn't work. Okay, that the friendship doesn't materialize. So the attitudes of young people are very different. Okay, moving on to bullying. Okay, again, both of those questions were asked in KLT and YLT. This is a question that was asked in both of the surveys, whether children and young people were bullied in the past 3 months. Okay, so you see the proportions are very similar. There's a caveat with Young Life and Times because of the much smaller number of respondents who completed those questions. There were only 30 who experienced bullying in the last 3 months. Now, in Young Life and Times, because we're aware of that might be a likely scenario which would inhibit the further analysis of the data, we asked lifetime experience of school bullying as well. And you can see here at the bottom that 42% of all Young Life and Times respondents who completed the survey said they were at some point in their school bullied. Okay. So bullying experience in the last 3 months, reasonably low, reflecting the results that we know from other surveys in relation to that, but lifetime experience is much higher. Okay, so what are the things that happen and how is it different between the children and the young people? Okay, so we can see here that being teased and hurtful names, we know from previous research in Young Life and Times that's often homophobic bullying that happens. It's much higher than in Kids Life and Times, although it also happens in Kids Life and Times. And then if you look like this year, I currently have a PhD student who works with girls in relation to sexting and things like that. Being, gossip and being spread is a big issue, in particular for girls. Cyberbullying is also much higher in Young Life and Times than in Kids Life and Times, and you would expect that, of course. The gender breakdown we don't provide in Young Life and Times for the reasons mentioned. There's only 30 respondents overall who were bullied over the last 3 months. But for KLT, we can provide a gender breakdown. You can see significant differences here. In particular, being left out. Okay, so for females is a much bigger issue. Twice the proportion of females have reported that they've been left out, playing, talking, whatever it may be. And gossiping, rumors being spread. Most of us recognize that from previous research and other knowledge that we have in relation to the issue as a predominantly female issue. Again, Kids Life and Times reflects that. In terms of the policy making, Young Life and Times and Kids Life and Times for a long time ago were involved with a project with a Commissioner for Children and Young People on involving children and young people in policy making in school, on school bullying. And what we seem to see that a large proportion of young people have actually awareness that there is a policy in place, and actually a significant proportion of both KLT and Young Life and Times respondents, 25% roughly, a quarter, have been involved in designing the policy. And looking back to the results that we had then, many years ago, that's a positive development. Moving on to good relations. This is funded by the Executive Office and has been funded for many years now, and that allows us to look at a time period and time change in relation to the perception of 16-year-olds on community relations. So that's the first time we asked that in 2003. Okay, what I want you to do is to look at those figures here and compare them with the figures here. This is 2017. Okay. So overall, the graph shows there's very little change in proportions over the 15-year period of young people thinking that relations are going to be better in 5 years' time. However, there has been a significant change in relation to the feelings of Catholics and Protestants in relation to that. Okay, for a long time, and there were publications, including on the ARC team, in relation to the disillusionment of Protestants, in relation to the Good Friday Agreement, the peace process, and it was reflected here. Catholics in 2003 were much more positive towards community relations than the Protestants were. Now look at that. For the last 3 years, there's been a reverse. Okay. Now we see that the Protestant 16-year-olds are more comfortable with community relations than the Catholics are. Okay? And that seems to be increasing. There was only 44% of the Catholics in the last year's survey who said that the relations are going to be better in 5 years' time, and that compares with 50% of the Protestants. Okay, a big change that appears to be happening over the last 3 years. The question is why? I invite you to ask the question. Okay. Looking at religion overall, will it make a difference for always in how people in Northern Ireland feel towards each other? And again, this is a time period and is put in a proper scale which shows little change, but some change. This change here, again, suggests that fewer and fewer 16-year-olds seem to think that religion will make a difference to how people feel about each other in future. Okay, but it's a very slow change. 2/3 now, compared to 86% 15 years ago. Good relations, and that's, Helen, that's what I was referring to yesterday at the meeting that we had. Summer camps. It's a question we asked for the first time, the TBAC summer camps. They're organized by the executive office. A lot of funding goes into them. And we asked about their participation in those summer camps, whether the respondents themselves have participated, someone in the family, both of them, or not. Okay, so you can see about 37% of respondents and the families have taken part in those summer camps. And we were asking how did they feel, if they have taken part, how they feel afterwards in terms of the other community. The figure that was floated yesterday was something like 90% felt more positive. No, Young Life and Times doesn't suggest that. Okay, it's more half, that's what I said yesterday. So 40% said they felt more positive. 41% there was no difference in how they felt towards the others. Okay, 10% said it depends on the scheme. There is a very small proportion who said they felt more negative after the TBOC summer camps, but it is almost negligibly small. However, about 1/4 of them said, well, I was already positive. That may well be one of the reasons why they take part in the scheme. We don't know. We have to monitor that. A question that we also asked for the first time is in relation to the Syrian immigrants and the attitudes towards that. Okay, so is Northern Ireland a society that welcomes refugees? And is it our duty to provide refugees with protection? And this is broken down by religious background. And you can see here, and that was what we hypothesized, that Catholics show a much more favorable view towards providing protection for refugees that come to Northern Ireland. And the figures suggest that that really is the case. Now that may well be because of the housing situation, that most of the refugees are actually being placed in Protestant areas rather than Catholic areas. We know that the pressure on housing in Catholic areas is much higher than Protestant areas due to the demographic development, and refugees are predominantly placed in Protestant areas. So it's likely that there's a much higher proportion of contact that people from Protestant areas experience. So we have to think about that as well. Overall, about half of the 16-year-olds agreed or strongly agreed that people from Syria should be able to come to Northern Ireland to escape the troubles in their countries. Safety in the community, so that's the second from last area. These are questions that were funded by the Department of Justice for the first time. And again, as I said, they are also comparable data in the Northern Ireland Life and Times survey, which will be released on the 13th of June, a month's time, roughly. Okay, so this is the 16-year-olds who feel that they're very safe or fairly safe in the area, and this is broken down by the area characteristics, whether they predominantly live in loyalist or Republican areas. Okay, so you can see that those who live in neither Republican nor loyalist areas proportionately feel much safer. I haven't provided the other breakdown of results, whether they don't feel safe or don't feel safe at all, because the numbers are so small. If you add those up, you can see that's almost 90% for all of the categories, suggesting that they feel quite safe. But there is a difference between loyalist Republican and non-sectarian areas. 6 and 10, 16-year-olds agreed that there was low levels of crime in their area, but a third also agreed or also said that there were crime related to drugs and alcohol that young people were involved in their areas. In terms of paramilitary questions directly, 14% said that the paramilitaries in their area have a controlling influence. Okay, paramilitary groups contributing to crime, drug dealing, antisocial behavior. About 1 in 5 16-year-olds agreed with that statement. About 8% felt that the paramilitaries have a positive influence in keeping the area safe. Okay, and again, as John earlier alluded to, there are significant differences between loyalist, Republican, and non-sectarian living residential areas. Do young people generally feel safe where they live? Okay. And do they feel confident to report crimes? 21% said yes. 49% disagreed. Okay. Interestingly, so there's a high proportion who disagreed with that statement. Feeding into what John said earlier, 52% agreed, so that's roughly half, that their PSNI keeps this area safe. And again, the difference is, I don't need to allude to again, between Catholic, Protestant, loyalist, and Republican areas. Last but certainly not least, something positive to finish off, the volunteering experiences. And the volunteer now came back to us due to some concerns he had with national surveys, which didn't capture enough young people on a national level and the level that was reported in terms of volunteering. That, again, there will be a bigger report that we work with volunteering now, and probably an event in September then we agreed on that. In relation to volunteering experiences, what you can see for now here, that there seems to be a difference, that young people in rural areas are more likely to volunteer for an organization and just generally volunteer. They're less likely not to volunteer. So 26 compared to 38 in urban areas. So 2/3, 67% of young people said they volunteered in the last 12 months. Again, females are the ones who are much more likely to do that. And that's probably reflecting your experience as well. Now we have to think about that, how that we can do about that. For most of them, volunteering was either a weekly activity, so either they did that on a regular basis with an organization, for example, or it was a one-off, like a fundraising event in school or something like that. Okay. So as you can see, the reasons to volunteer were often related to building their CVs, but also almost equally related to helping other people and gaining new skills. There's very little difference between those three main reasons why young people are involved in volunteering. Again, this here reflects the kind of activities that young people are most likely involved in. And very little difference. So the most likely event is organizing an event or fundraising, something like that. But some of them also have help on a regular basis a particular charity. In terms of the time that they spent, okay, the majority spend about 5 hours on a weekly basis if they volunteer. Okay. And that is the last slide for today. So we were curious why people stop volunteering and why they don't volunteer as well. And you can see here that, and again, we expected that the main reason why they don't volunteer is the high levels of schoolwork. They're 16, they have GCSEs or AS levels to go through. So that is one of the main reasons. Sometimes they feel the efforts are not appreciated, but it's a very small proportion of young people who think that. So generally, it's other commitments, 25%, or high levels of schoolwork, 33%. They seem to be the main reasons why they do that. Okay, so whistle stop tour finished. Just to say what we are up to next, we've already started planning the surveys for next year, and they are funded. So there will be a 2018 KLT and Young Life and Times survey. We're delighted about that, of course. We have just recently published an anniversary feature. Those of you who are regular visitors to ARC will know that we do that now for several anniversaries, including 10 years KLT, 15 years YLT. And it fits quite neatly with what Leslie was presenting earlier. So this is a feature on our research involving children and young people and doing research on the child's rights perspective. We have forthcoming reports that will go up online as well once the funders are all happy with that, for volunteering, community relations, shared education, and also school bullying. The drafts are all ready for that. They need to be finalized, so you'll find those on the report section. And last but not least, please feel free to contact us. I need to thank Mike at the back of the camera. The camera, by the way, now goes off for the discussion. So the discussion will not be recorded. Mike is the IT person in ARC and is responsible for making sure that those 300 or 400 pages go up and making sure that the online surveys work. Katrina, KLT director, Paula over there, the co-director of ARC, and Eileen Gray as well. Martina, where is she? Martina's just left. Martina is the brains behind all the logistics of that. So it's a big team effort to get this out every year, as you can imagine. So thanks for your attention, and I invite questions now.